Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Money Matters. Money clearly does matter. I always talk about wealth and the choices that wealth brings. I don't think anybody around the world is unaware that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II has passed. And I just wanted to share my very personal tribute to her, given that I'm one of the lucky ones that's actually met her just a few times. But throughout my entire life, she's been a presence, a rock, if you like, a point of stability in this ever-changing world. And I, like so many millions of others, have appreciated her humanity, her generosity, and her approachability. Not only was she the United Kingdom's longest serving monarch, but I think she was probably also the hardest working. She almost took the role as a civic duty, and she shared herself with the people in so many good and kind and honourable ways, like no other monarch I'm aware of in the past. And my personal exposure to the Queen, or the impact of the Queen rather, was with my father. I'm half English and half Irish. My dad was English, my mum still is Irish, she's still with us. My English granddad spent 7 years away during World War II, and at the tender age of 9, my dad became head of the household. Throughout the Blitz, he was with my grandma in London, and I know it meant a huge deal to him, and I'm pretty sure many other Londoners, and indeed Britons, that the Queen was literally there on the front line during the Blitz, working as a mechanic, and working with ambulances and whatever. And okay, technically she wasn't the Queen then, she was a princess, but still, for a princess to be doing that kind of stuff, literally in a war zone, was truly inspirational. And then of course, coronation, 1952, very young, yet very able. And what a life. That many prime ministers, Winston Churchill, all the people that she met at all the different levels and all the different interests in so many different societies, because we mustn't forget, she wasn't just the Queen of England, she was the Queen of so many places. But I want to give you an insight into two specific occasions on which I was lucky enough to meet her and spend some time with her, and her much adored husband. And I want to give you insights into their humanity and their character that I was lucky enough to have, that I know so many won't, because they didn't meet them, or if they did meet them, it was a quick shake of a hand and gone. They didn't actually get to talk to them. So the first occasion was actually 20 years ago, on the Queen's 50th Jubilee. As part of the celebrations, 50 people from Scotland were invited to a reception at her palace in Edinburgh. And I was one of those people. And the idea was, 50 people for 50 years. And well, why did you get selected, Paul? How did you end up on the guest list? I lived in Scotland for 20 years. I was running the second largest spirits, whiskey and gin and all that sort of stuff, called Allied Distillers. So anyway, long story short, I got invited to this reception at this palace, and I'm just a normal kid. So I'm like, what do I do? What should I call Her Majesty? So I had some training, lasted about 30 seconds. And this guy on the phone said, oh yeah, just call her ma'am as in jam. That was training part 1, ma'am as in jam. I thought, yeah, I can remember that. Number 2, if she offers you her hand, feel free to shake it as long as she's got a glove on. I thought, okay, I can probably remember that as well. So that was the sum total of my training to meet Her Majesty the Queen. Come the day, come the hour, through to Edinburgh we go. I wander in, got my invitation, present it. And I won't go through the entire guest list, but just as an example, they had people from industry like me, they had bankers, they had writers, artists, actors. So it was a very interesting place to be. And we were there on time, obviously early. So it was announced, maybe an hour into the event, that the Queen unfortunately was going to be late because she was opening the Falkirk Wheel that day. As you can see here, the Falkirk Wheel, very, very clever. So it replaced umpteen locks. So essentially it's a Ferris wheel that you drive a canal boat into, or a narrowboat, and zzz, up it goes. And And unfortunately, on the way back from the official opening of this Falkirk wheel, she'd taken a tumble, I think in a field or something. And so she was taken off, nothing wrong with her, fortunately. She was taken off just to be checked out, because I suppose that's the sort of thing you do if the Queen falls over, make sure she's okay. And consequently, she was an hour and a half late. Now, why is that relevant? It's relevant for this reason. And I'm smiling because of the memories that she gave me. And there's so many people in that room that day. These footmen were walking around with orange juice, apple juice, that sort of thing on the tray. So I thought, well, if the Queen's going to be late, I'll have a drink. So I said to this footman as he went past, I said, can I have one of them apple juices, please? And he said, very funny, sir. I said, well, I wasn't trying to be funny. I said, so you're telling me it's not apple juice? He said, no, sir. I said, well, that lemonade then? I said, all right, I give up. What are they? And he said, well, what you're calling lemonade, sir, is gin and tonic, 50-50, as the Queen Mother likes it. I was like, whoa, because this was like a half-pint tumbler with gin and tonic in it. I went, oh, okay. And so the apple juice? He said, well, that's scotch, sir. And he said, I said, let me guess, 50-50. So anyway, by the time the Queen arrives, I've had 3 apple juices. So I've had 1.5 pints of whiskey and water. So I was feeling quite good about myself and the world in general at that point. Anyway, this, I suppose you'd call it, receiving line formed. And the Queen starts working her way down the line. And she was like, good evening, hello, how are you doing, that sort of thing. And every conversation was like sub 20 seconds. And I can remember stood there in the middle of the receiving line thinking, the Queen must get so bored with just, who are you, what's your name, that sort of thing. And here's where my Irish, rather loquacious side came in. I thought, let's see if I can actually have a proper conversation with her, emboldened by my 3 apple juices. And I don't drink spirits anymore, by the way, and it's not for this reason. The Queen arrives at myself. I'm like, wow. I'm stood in front of Queen Elizabeth II, Queen of more countries than I've probably ever been to or even know about. And she's about to talk to me. I need to be on my best behaviour, number 1. Number 2, I honestly really want to try and see if I can make this conversation interesting for her. So she approached me, as she'd done with the others. And I said, good evening, ma'am. She held out her hand, and it had a glove on. So I thought, oh, good, shook it. I thought, phew, it's 2 out of 2, I can relax a bit now. And she just smiled at me. Am I doing something humorous, ma'am? And she said, you look like you were on edge and now you're not. Incredibly receptive, man. It's just, I was trained to do 2 things when I met you. I've just done 2 out of 2, so I can relax now. So she actually said to me, what do you do? And I said, well, why don't I tell you what some of your children do for my company and see if you can guess what I do. And she said, splendid. So, I mean, what mother doesn't like talking about her children? And at the time, Prince Charles, or now obviously King Charles III, was a prince at the time. On our products, we had a number of royal warrants. And Prince Charles, for instance, gave his royal warrant, the feathers of the Prince of Wales, to one of our products called Lefroy. So I just started talking about Lefroy, and boom, within 60 seconds, Her Majesty was way in front of me. Ah, Lefroy. So you're something to do with Lefroy. Mm-hmm. And then I started talking about Prince Andrew. And Prince Andrew at the time, I was, as well as doing the stuff in Scotland, I was running, I was part of the board that was running a company in South Korea called Jinro Ballantines. And Prince Andrew in particular was bringing us a lot of trade. And so I was telling her about all the good work that both Prince Charles and Prince Andrew had done from our company. And she was like, boom, Ballantines. So she got that. She was like, whoa. And I was so impressed. So anyway, I told her what I did and that sort of stuff. And she then started talking about football, because that year, the Football World Cup was co-hosted between Japan and South Korea. And she said, oh, yes, playing football. You interested in soccer at all? I said, well, yeah, absolutely, I am, yes. And she said, so how do you think we'll do this year? And I just stopped. I thought this could go 2 ways, but I'm gonna do it anyway. And I said, ma'am, I realise you're queen of quite a lot of places, and it might be quite hard to remember, what we all are at some stage. But was that the royal we that you just used? And I think she meant it in the context of how will England do this year. So I just used that, asked about the royal we. she was just away. She was just absolutely, having a good proper belly laugh. And then I said, I've worked it out. Because I told you I'm a company director in South Korea, you're buttering me up, aren't you? And she said, pardon? I said, you want tickets, don't you? I said, tell you what I can do. I can get you to the semi-final because that's in South Korea, but the final's in Japan. So I'll see what I can do, and she just absolutely thought that was hilarious. And I was obviously trying to be funny, emboldened by my 3 apple juices. And anyway, I could see that security were just about to, decapitate me or something. And she waved them away because she was, I think, enjoying the conversation. I certainly was. And we were been chatting for 10, 15 minutes. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, all the way down the line. Me, 15 minutes. So I said, ma'am, I've imposed far too much time on your good nature, your generosity, and thank you for inviting me. And my brain was in my head. I could just hear my mum saying, if you don't ask, you don't get. And the next thing that came out of my mouth, I don't know where it came from. I said, thanks ever so much for inviting me to your place. I'd love to invite you to mine. So if you've got some time, I'd love to invite you through to, the factory, and we could spend the day. There's a lot of people. Things moved on. So that was the 3 apple juices, and essentially my first proper encounter with the Queen where I actually talked to her. And I thought no more about it. And the rest of the evening was splendid, and I got to meet some really interesting people. Didn't see the Queen again. Well, I did see her, but I didn't talk to her again. And the next day, I got a phone call from the Lord Lieutenant of Dunbartonshire. And he said, Smith, or something like that. I said, hello, who's this? He said, I'm the Lord Lieutenant of Dunbartonshire. And the Lord Lieutenant is essentially the Queen's representative in accounting. So I was like, oh, you were at that do last night, weren't you? I said, yeah. And he said, you invited the Queen to your place, didn't you? And I said, yeah. And he said, oh, I have to say, that was a bit impudent. And I said, it wasn't meant to be. And he said, no. Well, the Queen didn't take it that way and she'd like to come. How's your diary looking? So 24 hours later, this kind of very normal guy with no particular, I'm just a normal guy. I'd been to a palace, talked to the Queen, invited her to my place, and then this Lord Lieutenant guy is phoning me up saying, when can she come? How's your diary looking? I'm like, this is surreal, inspirational, ordinary, in touch with every person. I already was incredibly inspired by her, but her reacting to it was a genuine request from me. So fast, I didn't know what to say. So anyway, we agreed some dates and so on and so forth, and she turned up. Not the next day or anything, it was a couple of months later. And she came through to our biggest bottling plant, still there, it's owned by somebody else now. It's a place called Kilmalid, just outside Dumbarton. Hence the Lord Lieutenant of Dumbarton, she was the guy phoning me up. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, or the then Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, went to stay with Lord Lieutenant just before, or the night before, they came to visit the factory. And there's a couple of things I want to tell you about that, because what a couple they were. My biggest gin, or the biggest gin that we produced, was a product called Beefeater, Beefeater gin, which many of you probably will have heard of. That had a royal connection in the sense that obviously the Beefeaters, the guards of the Tower of London, where the crown jewels are kept. So our marketeers had thought, well, let's launch a new product. And it wasn't connected with the royal visit. They were doing it anyway. And it was been a year probably in the planning. But as luck would have it, we'd got this new product called Crown Jewel, which was like a super premium Beefeater, if you like. And it came in cases of 6. And so we sent up to the Lord Lieutenant's place 6 bottles of this Crown Jewel, litres, and 50% alcohol by volume. And normal gin that you go and buy in Tesco or wherever is about 37.5%. Beefeater during my time was 40%, so export strength. This was strong stuff. So the next day, the Queen and her entourage and Prince Philip, everyone arrived, and I'm there with the local MP, the local MEP, the great and the good of Dumbarton, if you like, plus me. And the Queen, like myself, was very, very focused on recognising the achievements of people that had raised money for charity or they'd done incredible things. And so the whole agenda that we'd agreed, I didn't agree it with the Queen, I agreed it with one of her secretaries, was very much about recognising public service and charitable works and all that sort of thing. But Prince Philip approached me, pulled me to one side. I said, he said, are you the chap that sent that, what do you call it, Crown Jewel up to you? And I said, yes, sir, I am. I'd had no training for how to talk to him, so I just went for sir. on the grounds I thought was probably safe. And he said, "Don't suppose you've got any more of that stuff?" I said, "Of course, sir. Where would you like me to send it?" And he said, "Well, send it out to the palace if you would." And I said, "Sorry for the obvious question, sir, but which palace? You've got quite a few." And that made him laugh. He was so sharp. I mean, he was making everybody laugh all day. So anyway, he said, "Terrible trouble." And I said, "Sorry, sir?" And he said, "Crown Jewel, terrible trouble." I said, "Why, sir?" "Well, me and the Lord Lieutenant, we got stuck into one of those bottles of Crown Jewel, and terrible fuss. We were rather enjoying it, and we were just a little bit late for dinner, and Queenie," he called her Queenie, "Queenie got awfully mad with me for this." I could just imagine him sat in some castle somewhere, enjoying this Crown Jewel with his host, and subsequently being late for dinner. And somehow it wasn't his fault. It was my fault because I'd sent it to him. But anyway, that was just a little insight into how he was as well as how she was. And it's one of the most memorable days of my life. And whilst it's with huge sadness that I sit here talking to you about the passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, it's also with an element of joy, because she served, and I really mean served, I would argue, the country, the nation, the Commonwealth, but also she served a massive role of stability on the world stage. I'm honoured, privileged, proud to have spent some time with her. And my tribute to her is in no other capacity than as a human being. She was an absolutely incredible human being. And I would like to thank her for her service, as I'm sure we all would. I often talk about money, but it's never about the money. It's about the choices. And once you've got sufficient wealth that you can do whatever you want, which clearly was the case with the Queen since birth, what would you do? Because she, with that incredible wealth, and she did masterful things to reduce the civil list, to reduce the tax burden of the royal family on the country. She's actually got the royal family paying many, many millions of pounds in tax every year. She's re-engineered the finances of the royal family. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, should you attain that incredible wealth that the Queen clearly enjoyed, and you don't have to do anything, what would you do? Because what she did, multiple public appearances, and contribution to good causes and encouragement of people that want to do the right thing, I find inspirational. And whatever your calling, I think you cannot fail but to be inspired by what our Queen did. Your Majesty, it was an absolute pleasure to have spent time with you, an honour to have been one of your subjects. And you've inspired me, and I'm sure many millions around the globe, and we will miss you.